Welcome to the Kings Beat podcast. I'm James Ham, the Kings Insider for ESPN 1320 and the Kings Beat. Joining me, Fox 40's Sean Cunningham. Sean.
James. Brenden. Hi.
Okay, and hi. And of course, we have Brenden Nunes from the Kings Pulse podcast. Brenden, how are you?
James, I'm good. Sean, how are you?
Brenden.
Doctor.
No, things are really good. You know,
Brenden
we reached
doesn't
one of
know
my.
that.
He has no idea what that is.
I don't
Watch
even
Fletch,
realize
man.
it's movie references until you say, I don't know what that is.
Spies Like Us.
Sure.
Oh, I
Yep.
said Fletch. Yeah, I said you should watch Fletch, but it's a better movie than Spies Like Us. But
I saw Monty Python the other day. I think that's the right
What?
name. The most random thing I've ever seen.
Okay,
The whole
but
movie?
which...
Yeah.
No.
I
He's
hesitated, obviously, but no, I'm pretty sure I did.
Okay, and then someone in the chat said
hold
that there's going to be a new Mel Brooks History of the World Part 2.
That's great, Brenden. When you were at the end of the movie, did you see credits, sir?
I did, but like once
That's
I
how
saw
it
the
knows you're at
credits,
the end.
but once I saw the credits, I watched this with other people. So once I saw the credits, I realized, wait, how did it end? So I might have missed the very end of it, but there was a point I realized that nothing made any sense. So yeah,
Okay.
that's where we're at.
Okay,
Which I'm not crazy for thinking that, right? That movie makes no sense.
it's not supposed to. It's a
Right.
skit. It's
Were you
like
high?
skit comedy.
No comment.
Were you? high?
All
I
right.
feel like I'm supposed to be with that movie.
Well, yeah, I could see that.
That's
Some
what
might think
thought,
I
like,
am. My eyes, by the way, look like I've been crying rivers of tears, but allergies coming back in full effect.
Yeah, I think they got your guy Chris Tavares. He showed up with like.
Oh
It
yeah,
looked like he'd Botoxed his eyes. He was all
struggle
swollen.
bus.
Like, what's happening? I'm like, I think you need to go to a doctor. Like anytime you have something with your
Immediately.
eyes, like go straight to the doctor. Like the worst thing ever is if something happens to your eyes. So I don't know. Yeah, the randomness of the Kings Beat podcast. Thanks for joining us, everyone. If you're watching us on YouTube, we ask that you give us a thumbs up and subscribe if possible. That would be very helpful to us. If you're listening on iTunes or Spotify or name that platform, and you want to give us a rating and review, that also helps us. If you'd like to jump on board and support the Kings Beat and all the good work we do here, go to thekingsbeat.com, become a premium subscriber, get invites to things like the happy hour, but also all premium content that is locked. You get access to. And outside of that, like, hey, what's going on, guys? We got a breather.
It's one of my favorite times a year, the All-Star break, where we can take this like extended break from NBA basketball and a little bit of the grind and concentrate on a few other things. But yeah, especially right now, who would have thunk Kings in third place in the Western Conference? And
Yeah, it's wild.
and holding it for like over a month now, so it's impressive.
It's precarious at this point. Would you agree, Brendan?
It would. Yeah, I mean, we'll see how long they are able to hold on to it after this point. A game above the Suns that they just fell to in their last game that is going to eventually have some reinforcements coming along that are decent additions along with some of the teams below them. So it'll be interesting to see how it goes moving forward. But I'm glad to have reached the break myself personally. And there's a couple people on Sacramento's roster that are going to be participating in this weekend. So that should be fun.
Yeah. You know what? Let's start there. I was going to hold this off to the end, but let's just do the business of basketball.
This is gonna be a record.
For sure.
Yeah, we'll do it early. How about that? Like the Sacramento Kings are well represented at the 2023 NBA All-Star Game in Salt Lake City, Utah. We've got Domantas Sabonis. We've got De'Aaron Fox in the main game. We've got Keegan Murray in the Rising Stars Challenge. We've got Kevin Huerter in the three-point shootout. You know, like if they could have got Davion Mitchell in, that would have given them 5. That would have been crazy if they would have got him in the Rising Stars. That did not happen. That did not happen. We'll get to that maybe later. But let's start there with the business of basketball. What are you guys looking forward to the most? Sean is going to be at the All-Star game in Salt Lake City. Brenden and I are not making the trip for a variety of reasons. But yeah, like, is there one of these aspects of the game that you guys are looking forward to? Or the weekend, I guess.
3-point challenge seems pretty fun to me, just because of the roster. I wish the dunk contest was more interesting. I know there's no Sacramento Kings players involved in that, but
Or any
3-point
players
contest
of
wise,
note.
yeah, I think that's the whole issue. That usually that is one of the more entertaining parts. And
That's weird.
there's a player that I'm convinced Philly just signed because he's in the dunk contest. But but for Tyrese and Buddy to be in the 3-point contest alongside Kevin Herter and a lot of great other shooters as well, Jason Tatum, Anthony Simons, Lauri Markkanen, Damian Lillard, and Tyler Hero. Like, I think that's going to be one of the more entertaining things. Obviously, I'm looking forward to watching Sacramento's 2 All-Stars in that All-Star game, and hopefully Domas is not his typical just make plays for other style in an All-Star game, but something tells me he will be. But I think 3-point contest is most entertaining for me.
Sean?
I would say, first of all, with the dunk contest, do you think we're like witnessing the end?
How sad is that?
It is
Like-
mega sad. Especially, I mean, look, there are some interesting athletic players that are taking part. I mean, KJ Martin just probably hand him the trophy, maybe. I mean, am I out of my mind for thinking that? I don't know.
No.
Yeah.
I wish Shaden Sharp didn't pull out.
Me too. There's a lot of things I'm looking forward to. I think the thing I'm looking forward to most is kind of the possibility of seeing Fox and Sabonis on different teams. And I'm with you, Brenden. I kind of think the Domantas Sabonis factor and impact in that game will be a little bit not entertaining. I think he's just going to kind of lay back. But I think Fox will probably kind of go for it. I think he's gonna, he'll run around and he'll get his. I'm not saying he's gonna go for MVP, but I think he'll go to show that he belongs and kind of get some points up. And the format is what it is when they add the 24 points to the tallies for the fourth quarter, and you play to a certain amount. I kind of like the format. It worked. It was interesting last year. I think the last 2 or 3 All-Star games have ended in a way that was entertaining. So. I don't really think this one is going to fall short of that. I kind of expect that, but yeah, it's nice to see Sacramento very well represented, and of course, Neemias Queta also with the G League team. I want to shout him out too. So that'll take place on Sunday before the All-Star game as well. So there's a number of things I'm looking forward to, and how about that, Hassan Minhaj in the celebrity game, the Davis resident and Sacramento Kings fan. So,
and I'll add real quick, Domas's last 2 games as a part of an All-Star team. 19 minutes in the first one, 18 minutes in the second one. He's never scored more than 2 points, guys. And he's never taken more than 2 shots.
yeah, he doesn't care.
Come on.
Come on, Domas. Okay, so I think that there's a possibility that we could actually have an upgrade here for one of the Kings players. It looks like Anthony Simons is not going to be able to participate in the 3-point shootout because he's going in for an MRI today. I wouldn't be totally shocked if they ask Keegan. I mean, he's shooting 42% from 3 or right around there. He's like one of the best young 3-point shooters in the game. So I'm going to say, like, there's a possibility there.
And he's in town. He'll be there. I mean, he was supposed to leave to go, like he talked to us the other day and talk about how he was going to go see his family, and only his mom was coming up for it. But it just requires to stay one more night. Why not?
Yeah. I think that there's a possibility there. So we'll have to wait and see what they do there with that position. But as opposed to the slam dunk contest, I think 3-point shootout, you have to have like the even numbers. So right now, I think it's 8 players. And if Simon can't play, then they would have to add somebody. And Keegan's probably, because he's there, probably one of the better candidates to add. So I don't know. That would be interesting. And outside of that, the other thing I'm looking forward to is Fox being there. Like, we've got to watch Fox. Like, Sean and I watched him come into the league. Brash, like, skinny kid with spiky hair coming in. He's always been fun to cover. He's always been, like, honest and straightforward. But like, to watch him grow up and now he's a husband and a dad again and all that stuff. To me, it's been fun to watch him grow up and fun to finally see him get to a point where he's being recognized for his play outside of the city of Sacramento. So that's the biggest thing I'm looking forward to is, like Domas is cool, and of course watching him on a nightly basis I totally appreciate. But Fox is one of those guys that's kind of like homegrown guy that you get to see kind of come full circle in his career and make it to the dance because he's played so well and his team's playing well. So if there's anything I'm looking forward to, I think it would be Fox, even though like I don't like to watch a lot of it. I don't like, I'll be honest. Like once you go to a couple of them, you're like, okay, I don't want to do this anymore.
It's a
There's
circus, man.
yeah, there's no original content. There's no one-on-ones. There's no like everything is in like giant scrum settings. It's better for, I'll say this, it's better for TV for like Sean and Chris and for, again, Matt George and is Kevin Johns going? It's better for the TV audience because you have like all this like crazy wild stuff going on. But for writers, it's like you're in a giant scrum that is 10 times bigger than what we have here in Sacramento, and you're going to hear the same questions we've asked them. It's not going to be anything different. So, and then the game itself is just wild and like overwhelming, and there's usually not enough media seats, and it's like fighting for position, and it's kind of weird. So, like, I'm not going to miss it. Am I, Sean? Sean's like,
Nope.
No, I'm going.
He
to
nailed
parties.
it. He nailed it right on the head. It's a lot of stuff that happened on the periphery, if you will. There's a lot of networking, lot of interesting detail that can come away in context and perspective. But and yes, James, parties, concerts, all kinds of goodies like that. So
Well,
for
you're not
me,
the
it's
party type, Sean, right? So
no, not at all. Just I lay low and stay home always with cats.
It's Utah.
But
Do you have that
With cats.
shirt? Did you ask Avery to borrow his shirt? His
what was the shirt? Oh, his
the-
party shirt.
what was the
His
yeah, his,
gray-
party,
yeah,
his
yeah.
dance club, his dance club
disco
shirt.
shirt. I did not.
Discoteca.
I
His
don't
valet
think
shirt.
it would. Yeah, it might stretch on me.
Yeah,
I
go ahead,
will
Brennan.
say for All-Star game, I do think De'Aaron is obviously like the more entertaining player, and I think that's a lot of what factors in for All-Star games. And it helps that in the month of January, he's averaging 30 and going crazy. But like there's De'Aaron's highlights, I think are a lot more entertaining than Domas's highlights. And the All-Star game is filled with nothing but highlights.
Yeah, I guess it's a good segue because we saw Fox put up a highlight reel dunk in the win over Dallas, which I think that kind of quieted some of the noise after the trade deadline where the Kings did nothing. Well, I shouldn't say nothing. Sorry, Kessler Edwards, where the Kings did a minimal amount at the trade deadline.
How about where the Kings were unable to secure any new players for their team outside of Kessler Edwards?
Well, I mean that would make you think that like they didn't have
tried.
the ability to. Well, yeah, like all right, Sean.
They kicked the tires and tried and kept things in the future in mind and
Try harder.
Good
The
Lord.
difference between the Stockton Kings got an upgrade. Just depends which Kings we're talking about here.
Yeah.
Jesus
Yeah, but
Christ.
let's start with the Dallas win because I think that like it calmed people down. So after the trade deadline passes, you get the loss to Dallas without Luka, which I think a lot of Kings fans were flustered by. But then you have this otherworldly performance by De'Aaron Fox on Saturday. And at 26 points in the fourth quarter and overtime combined, 14 points in the overtime, which is a Sacramento Kings record. He beat Peja Stojakovic's record. 8 of 8 from the free throw line in the overtime session, which again is a record. I mean, we're talking about 5 minutes. He scored 14 points and hit 8 of 8 from the free throw line. That's flat out crazy. He's on a streak where he's broke 34 consecutive times. I think he's got 135 points over that stretch. He's just been really, really incredible. And we talk about the dunk contest. he had that steal late in the fourth quarter, I think it was, of the win over Dallas, where he stole the ball and had the breakaway and the hammer and screamed. Are we
And he
watching?
punched it.
He
He
did
punched
punch it.
it too. That was great.
Yeah. Are we watching the moment where De'Aaron Fox is elevated to star status by his inclusion in the All-Star game, but all of a sudden is elevating his game to match that? Because it kind of feels like since he's been named an All-Star and since he's been so incredible.
I don't know if I would say that quite yet. I'd like to, but just objectively, I would say that was, in my opinion, his finest moment of the season. I think there are some people that think it could be his finest of his career, but I just don't see that. You went into that game with 10 points and were rather quiet and just kind of largely ineffective. But you did exactly what everyone criticizes you for, which is, well, wait till the fourth quarter and he just turns it on. And he did, and it was really sensational. I think in that game he showed a lot of people that he was worthy of the All-Star selection, especially considering the previous game where just the night before it wasn't all that impressive.
I think it's the difference between star and superstar.
Yeah.
And I don't think
That's
any of
fair.
us are saying that De'Aaron is a superstar, but if you want to not necessarily want to coast, but are focused on more so getting your teammates involved in those first few quarters, first 3 quarters, and then decide, okay, now this is my time to take over in the fourth and whatever goes on after that, if there happens to be an OT, then like once the fourth quarter comes around, at this point, it's expected for me. And I don't know if you guys are at the same point, but with the clutch stats that he's put up throughout the course of this year, having that guy is so essential, and it's most important time. Like superstars would do it throughout the whole game, and maybe De'Aaron can get to that point. There's no point in waiting on that, betting on that, or anything. I think there's moments where he's tried to do it in other quarters, and it's hard to do that for an entire game. I think the big difference between star and superstar is consistency, but having somebody that does it at the end of the game is so crucial that I would hesitate for the superstar, but having that star is still so ridiculously important to this team. And I think that he was great in the Dallas game. He was great in the Phoenix game, did what he could to carry them. He did have a handful of unforced turnovers that Coach Brown pointed out post game as well that I thought really killed them when they were trying to make a run at the end of that game. But you can ask him to be better, but this is really all you could want. I mean, now, like I said, you could ask him to be better, but he's been phenomenal.
Yeah, and I think we pile on him because he doesn't do it every quarter, right? But I also think that like what we're hearing from some of his teammates, and from Mike Brown, it's almost by design. And I even say this, it feels like he may have heard some of the criticism after he goes off for 26 in the overtime and fourth quarter, right? In the next game out, where he goes into half with 18 points and finishes with what he finished 35 the other night against Phoenix. But I'll go back to like we got Keegan Murray after they lost to Dallas, right, on Friday. And we asked, I asked Keegan, like, hey, you had 16 points at the end of the third quarter and you never took another shot. And his response to me told me that, like, they're on the same page here, or at least partially on the same page. And he said, we have the best fourth quarter player in the league right now. So my job in the fourth, if I get an open shot, is to hit it. But I'm just trying to do everything else on the floor the best I can. I have complete faith in what Fox does in the fourth quarter. And Mike Brown even talked about, like, look, we can't ask De'Aaron Fox to be fourth quarter Fox in quarters 1, 2, and 3. Like, no one has that kind of juice to sustain that kind of success. But he's allowing his teammates to be really good in those first 3 quarters, and it's almost like it's by design that the team is saving up Fox for the fourth. And so, like, while I want to beat him down a little bit for not having more than like 8 points or 10 points in the first half or the first 3 quarters, it does seem like it's by design to a certain degree, where he is going around and kind of setting up the game for everyone else and setting up the game for the fourth quarter when, he's able to turn it on and be really strong.
I think that also De'Aaron can just turn it on. And I don't know how many players can actually do that. I think that it's important for other players to catch a rhythm. Like Harrison Barnes, for example, usually has a very good first quarter. And if Harrison Barnes is going into that fourth quarter, where sure it's De'Aaron Fox time, but he's already knocked down 3 of 5, 3 of 6, when it does get kicked out of him because De'Aaron gets double teamed or whatever the defensive scenario is, that he might be more likely to knock that down because he was allowed to get a rhythm earlier in the game. Same with Keegan Murray or Kevin Huerter. So I think that there's an aspect of De'Aaron is able to turn it on, but that's not the case for everybody. Sometimes other players need to, in my mind, get in a rhythm earlier in the game to be more effective in the fourth.
I also feel like, fortunately for him, especially, in this year, especially, it's been largely effective. I think it can be a little bit easier to game plan when like, I'm not saying that he has to be the fourth quarter Fox, because sometimes the ball movement isn't there. Like you're just, to hell with the rest of your teammates, and you're just kind of putting it all on your shoulders. It can sometimes have that type of feel to it. And especially players that do this kind of regularly tend to have that feel to it as well. And I'll look back at that Dallas game in overtime when they don't run a play and they just kind of go, he's just going to hold and chuck. And worst case, you're just going to overtime. It's like, well, no, you could have probably ran a play there. Like, if anything, I know, look, that's just the NBA. A lot of times you don't see a lot of teams run type of plays, scripted plays. They're just going to hold, and let the one-on-one play or let that player kind of be the star that they either think they are or they know they are. And for me, it's not so much of what we see in the fourth quarter, and he just needs to have that type of impact through all four quarters. That's unrealistic. What I'm saying, though, more is you don't have to necessarily do that takeover mode in all three quarters, but have something to where you're a little bit more aggressive in your shot selection. Realize that you are that guy and you are capable of getting a bucket. And I think you see it in spurts, and oftentimes when you see it with Fox in the first three quarters is when the other team goes on a 6-0 run, or he gets frustrated at a lack of a call on one end, and he comes charging down, gets to his spot, and hits that little pull-up free throw line extended to just get that bucket back. A lot of times they're done in retaliation, if that makes sense. So I like it. I mean, it's really nitpicky, but I understand people wanting to see him keep his foot on the pedal, and I don't think I think it's super unrealistic to think that he can be that fourth quarter person in all three quarters, because otherwise he'd be like the greatest basketball player in the history of the world. No one's expecting that of him. So you go out there and you try to see some balanced scoring, but I also feel like I don't love the takeover modes all the time, because I think this team is at its best when the ball's just moving. And I'd like to see more of that. If it results in him taking shots, look, that's what you want. I mean, he's your guy. Him and Sabonis are your guy. I also feel like I'd like to see Domas have more touches in the fourth quarter, because everything is so easy for him. So, yeah, I think that's just a long-winded way of saying I like the fourth quarter Fox, but I think it could still be just as impactful in different areas of the game as long as the ball movement's still there.
Yeah, I'm going to bring up a couple of points that I think might make sense in this conversation. Number one, it seems to me that when he hits his 3-point shot early, the 3-point shot is so easy, and it doesn't require a bunch of energy, right? So, like these takes that he has to the rim, these where he's breaking down defenses and getting to space and like pulling up for jumpers and stuff. You can watch each of those and understand that those 5-second bursts, they do take a lot of energy. But sitting out on the perimeter and taking the 3-point shot, it doesn't. And when he isn't hitting his 3-point shot, I think that's when we're starting to see like sort of the lackluster numbers in quarters 1, 2, and 3. When he is hitting the 3 is what we got on, Tuesday night against the Suns, where all of a sudden the game is coming easier to him and he doesn't have to expend energy to get some of those baskets when he end up with 4 made threes. Well, that's
Oh, Sean, you might be muted too. Is this just me? Am I by myself here or
No,
what?
I was muted there. He was on a roll.
He was.
I was captivated by what Mr. Ham was talking about. I don't know if we're gonna
It
get him back
it
though.
was 4 of 7 for De'Aaron from 3 in that game against Phoenix. 35 points, 4 assists, 4 boards, 12 of 22 from the field, but 4 of 7 from beyond the arc. And he hit them early, right? Like, to me, to try to attempt to continue on his point, I feel like when defenses see him hit that shot early, they react and then are forced to guard him a little bit differently, which with his speed obviously is an issue. Do we have Mr. Hammer back?
I'm back. Sorry, frozen ham.
Sorry.
You're good.
Sorry.
We heard you talking about De'Aaron making 4 of 7 from
Yeah. I
3
was just
beyond
saying
Phoenix.
that, like, one of my points was if he's hitting the 3, I think he's a different player early on because those points come easier. The other thing I'm going to point out in the fourth quarter is rarely do I think it's selfish what he's doing. And maybe that's crazy, but every time I watch him break down a defense, like, very rarely is it a bad shot. He's almost always cleared enough space. He's unguardable in those situations, and that's why he's been so successful because no one can stay in front of him. And it's not like he's unwilling to pass because he has shown the ability to pass in those situations. But I feel like more oftentimes than not, he's taking good shots that you think are going to go in. Every once in a while, there's one or two where you're like, okay, maybe that was ill advised. But if you can get within, the where he's getting on the floor, if you can get within 15 feet of the basket, like, he's almost unstoppable. I mean, he's shooting such a high percentage from the mid range. He's shooting such a high percentage at the rim. His floater game is nuts. Like, to me, I don't feel like he's just being like, when I watch Luka do it, take over a game like that, there's so many times where it's literally like 20 seconds into the shot clock and he just keeps dribbling and moving, and like you're just wondering when it's all gonna like end, and then what's gonna happen. He's gonna shoot the whole time, right? When Fox is doing it, he's burning, like, it's 8 seconds into the shot clock. Like, it's
Yeah,
not
it's
like
quick.
some elongated, like, drawn out thing. He's in a rhythm, he's flowing, he's going fast, and no one can stay in front of him, and he's getting to a spot. And I feel like I have confidence, like his teammates do, that, oh, that's probably going in. Like, every time. Like, even when he pulls up from 18, a little fall away, you're like, more often than not, that big teardrop from the outside has gone in those situations. So I kind of don't have any problems with it. I do, if he could score like 4 or 5 more points early in the game and kind of like get some, get some easy buckets early, that would be great. But at the same time, am I expecting him to score 35 or 40 every night? No. I don't think he can hold up doing that. I don't think anyone can really hold up doing that. So I'm really impressed with what we're seeing. And I think we are seeing like the next version of him, and him's like, since Versay has had the baby, I think we've seen him just like, he's blossoming again. And, even the first 3 games that he had 30, that was 3 games in 4 nights. To me, he scored 100 points in 3 games, but he scored 100 points in 4 nights. And that's just wild. Even the crazy overtime, 14 points in overtime, that was the 3rd game in 4 nights. So it was a back-to-back, but they also played on Wednesday. They played on Friday. They played on Saturday. And that's when he came up with all those points. So anyway, I think it's been pretty impressive. So I don't want to, like what Sean said, nitpick all that much, because I still think that I see moments where he sets up his teammates and gets some open looks, and whether they hit those or not is, up to those players. But I think he instills confidence in people by finding them in those situations. I just don't think that there's a lot of shots for anyone else in the fourth quarter.
Well, and it was when you talk about Keegan saying that, it was kind of like I don't know if I like hearing that. You want him to feel like there is an equal opportunity out there for offense, but you are recognizing you have a star factor there. But you have to recognize when you have a shot to take it, because especially if they're going to leave you in the fourth quarter. It's just part of the. I don't know. It's just part of like one of those development things for him because you don't want him to think like, oh, I just have to get the ball to Fox.
I kind of felt like it's a what is it, my captain moment. That's what that was.
Yeah, but that's dangerous. That's dangerous, and that's also a.
It is. I
reference
think it's
to
dangerous if it's everyone doing it.
a movie that Brenden would not understand.
No.
It's too bad. Dead Poet Society, really good movie.
I will say I feel like Keegan would notice if he caught the ball wide open because the help defense was focused on De'Aaron. I don't think it's
James again. James,
we did.
It's an unfortunate. Oh, look at that!
I thought that was
face.
just a thinking face.
We just blew his mind. Look at that.
He's thinking about shit. What's going on with my third boat right now?
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, I don't know. Kind of a interesting thing breakdown of that, but there are part of me too is just because I've been so enamored with wanting to see Domas take advantage of really any situation. I think last night was a little bit different with Phoenix because DeAndre Ayton, such a big body, big presence there, kind of makes life a little bit difficult at times. But in the Dallas series shouldn't have, in my opinion, have been as tasking on him as it had. So
I'll ask you real quick since you've been ignore the audio for the YouTube or the visual for the YouTube audience.
Yeah.
This will
I'm
be
back.
fixed. I'll ask
Brenden
you.
was about
quick,
to ask
Sean.
a question. Here we go.
I am, if that's all right.
Yeah.
You've been very big on Domas being score first, which agreed. Like I've been convinced throughout the course of this year, not big, but like feeling like he could more often, I guess. Last 5 games, he's averaging 6.2 assists. I think in the last 10, that number is at 5. Do you feel like teams have been defending him differently and feel any different with that?
It's funny. I actually have wondered that myself. I kind of think he's being. Part of me was wondering if he's being just. I just need to get to the trade to the All-Star break here because I feel like he's had such a workload put on him and he's just kind of beat up a little bit. So I've wondered that too. I don't think it's anything the defense did. Again, I think that first Dallas game gave me some concern there because I didn't think they should have given them the fits that they did overall, and I think he was largely to blame. I don't think he was good defensively. Had some real struggles, but he's also out there doing it primarily all by himself when it comes to a lot of the big quote unquote big men roles for this team. So bearing that in mind, I kind of wonder if it's just a little bit of a wind down as you get into the break.
Yeah, I think no one needs a break like Sabonis needs a break. I mean, he caught
I could use a break.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, but he caught the big knee to the quad from JaVale, and that clearly hurt. His thumb is clearly, still an issue. It's gotten better, but it's still an issue. That was another thing this week. Keegan talked about the thumb and how he doesn't have to wear the brace anymore. And then he started delving into the ligament issues and stuff. And we're like, okay, man, they've never diagnosed your injury. They've never told us an injury for you. Like you showed up on the injury one game. It's just a sore thumb. Since then, we have no idea what's wrong with you. But it looks like he's at least getting a little more healthy. But with Sabonis, I think just the mental toll that a season takes on you and how much pressure has been put on him and how much pressure I feel like this whole entire Kings team is under at this point, just because they haven't been here before and they don't know this feeling. And, being the 3 seed, Mike Brown has talked about going from being the hunters to the hunted. And I think that that's a big deal for this team. They're starting to feel that, they're the hunted. Even I think Phoenix has one more game before the deadline, before the break here, and they can cut the Kings' lead to a half game in the Pacific, and for the 3 seed. Like, I don't know about you guys, but like, where do you think they're going to end up? How do you think they're going to hold up here with sort of like where they're at in the standings? Because clinging to 3 is going to be very, very difficult.
Where do I think Phoenix or Sacramento is going to end up?
Sacramento.
Hopefully in top 6, but I think it's more so we're talking about 5-6 than 3-4. I think that Phoenix, I don't know the exact timeline on KD, but once he comes back, and even where they're at right now, like the Kings just saw the other night, like Phoenix is a very good team. The Clippers have had Kawhi and PG back, which they've been missing throughout most of this season. And both of those guys to be playing is pretty big for that team. And after that, I mean, to be honest, there's about 3 other teams that I wouldn't be shocked if they pass the Kings. But I also might be buying a little bit more into just these other teams are more proven. And it just takes a little bit more time for me to believe in this Sacramento roster. But I think they'll stay top 6. But right now, I lean more towards 5-6 rather than I do 3-4.
Yeah, I'm with you, and I think we'll be watching that Thursday game because it's going to be Clippers and Suns, and with a half game between them in that 4-5 Suns Clippers range, it's gonna be a game that's gonna be worth watching. And I wouldn't be. I'm almost expecting both those teams to leapfrog the Kings, but I think that's okay. I don't think that that's a terrible thing. I don't think they're falling out of the top 6, but as Brenden alluded to, I could certainly see it happen by virtue that you have what 3 games separation from 3 to 7, and not much more after that to get to 11. So no, I don't think they're going to tumble by any stretch, but I do think Phoenix is. You had a talent like KD. I mean, it's funny. You're also still undefeated within the division, which I think is interesting with that team. So they've won 7 of 10. See what happens when they come in with the Clippers. I think the Clippers are going to win that game though.
Phoenix is undefeated in the division. Is that what you said?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah, like I think Saturday night worked as like. Sean, you remember when they traded DeMarcus Cousins at the trade deadline, and then the first game back from the break, we got to like the mid-third quarter, and the Kings looked like they were getting beat up on by Denver, and then they had this moment where they went on this big rally, and they came back and they beat Denver. I think they beat Denver that night, but that moment where you're like, I think everything's going to be okay. Like that's what everyone in the building felt, and of course it fell apart right after that. But on Saturday night, I think that's the overtime win kind of gave fans that moment like, okay, we didn't see our team do anything at the trade deadline, and all these other teams did. And, Dallas beat them without Luka on Friday night. And then you get to Saturday and they rallied and they fought and they clawed back and they found a way to win. I think that was like a big like sigh of relief for fans because they easily could have gone into the break. If they lost that game, they easily could have gone into the break in 5th place, right?
Well, I think you also couple it with some of the stuff that's happened just over the past few weeks. I mean, look, you almost lost in Houston. You had some moments on the road, so like you can if you're a fan, you're looking at the success of the team, and you're like, yeah, you've earned 3rd, you've held on to 3rd, but you've really been a 500 basketball team for the greater part of couple, maybe few weeks now. And characteristics of a basketball team that's 500, you get a lot of Jekyll and Hyde. So you can see that there's moments that you're like, man, on some nights they look fantastic, there's other nights where they just look like they don't have a clue defensively, and if the ball's not falling, boy, they're done for. So fortunately though, if you're a fan of this team, you see that they don't get really blown out of games, and that's a really encouraging sight for a team that's battling the way that they are and positioning themselves the way they have. So I also feel like, there's a lot of that thought and calculus that goes into what this team is right now and where they stack up in the West. I mean, this is a bona fide, true, tested team that you're not going to say is a fluke. I mean, it's not a fluke this far into the season. It may not be the type of recipe that it is going to be successful in a series, a 7-game series, but you've positioned yourself well. You've taken advantage of your schedule. You've done what you're supposed to do for the most part. And even now, where it feels a little bit 500 basketball, even if this might be truly the way you play going forward, considering the way other teams are now going to put their foot on the pedal a little bit more and really try to start positioning themselves and going for it. You took care of business so far, so you can kind of have the luxury to have this. Like I told one of their people over the course of the rest of the season, they're like, what do you expect? I said, I think if you go 500 basketball, you're still going to be fine. If you go 500 the rest of the way into the playoffs, I think that you've got enough equity there to where you should be just fine to eclipse maybe that of what you thought you could really do in the postseason, and maybe win a series and see what happens. But I'm not expecting like them to go out there and win 7 out of every 10 games.
Yeah. Go ahead,
I very
Brenden.
much agree with Sean. I think that I get why it's important to update expectations, and maybe I'm at the point where I need to do that more so, but I can't help but come back to like what I would have identified as a successful season coming into this year. And top 6 was kind of a dream, to be honest. Like I thought that just getting in the play-in and making it in from there was best case scenario. And that was probably sneaking into the play-in. So for the Kings to be going into the All-Star break sitting in the 3rd seed, like as much as, like I said, maybe I should have updated my expectations more than I have, but just reflecting back on what a successful season in my mind would have been at the beginning of the year, I feel like they're in a phenomenal spot.
Well,
Is it
and guys,
okay-
real quick, James, what it really
Yeah.
boils down to is you can identify those teams that you expected more so than you did from the Kings. Like if you're going back, rewinding to the beginning of the season, this is why, no one has a crystal ball to be able to figure this out. But I think we all thought the Lakers would be better. I think we all thought that the Portland Trailblazers would be a little bit better.
Warriors.
Certainly the Warriors are in that category. The Pelicans, the T-Wolves maybe, and even the Clippers, who had started a little bit further down and now are surging a little bit. Even the Suns, for by and large, for a greater part of their season, they were a little bit further down the Western Conference standings. So that's some of the thought process that goes into it. And by virtue of a lot of those teams still remaining farther down in the Western Conference, the Kings have taken advantage of that, man. And it's they're everything that they've done is not fluky. You don't make it up to 3rd and have this like, okay, you've done it by luck and taken advantage of the schedule in front of you and all these things. Like, sure, to a degree, but like you've got a tough schedule the rest of the way, and it's why the first part of the schedule was so important. And so now you've positioned yourself well. If you can hold on to it, again, I don't think they're going to slip past 6, and that's, you're talking 3 spots in the Western Conference that's still very, very jumbled. I think they've earned it, and they're going to hold on to it.
Okay. I'm intrigued because when I looked at, like, again, the Saturday game, I thought, okay, that's a big, like, sigh of relief. But then we get to Tuesday and you see the holes again. Like, was there a game that you could have looked at, like, and said, okay, they really need that backup center when Ayton is going right over the top? Oh, man, they really need that backup point guard when Chris Paul is orchestrating, like, this brilliance. And, oh, man, they really could have used a little bit more length when Devin Booker starts going nuts and Mike Brown starts, stretching and reaching for Kessler Edwards and Keon Ellis in the late 3rd quarter. And that's where I started to get to the point where, man, I would like to tell you that I believe in, like what you're saying, Sean, that this is who they are and that the final 25 games is going to be split 50-50 or whatever. But at the same time, I look at the holes and I still think you didn't fill them. Like, they're still there.
Right.
They're still obvious, and you didn't do anything about it, which kind of brings us to the next discussion, and that's can the Kings get better from here? Can they be players at all in the buyout market? And is there a player or two in the buyout market that you guys think that you would like to see in a Kings uniform to kind of help put this team just not over the top, but in better position and maybe disguise a hole for the next, month and a half?
First of all, there's nobody in the buyout market that exists that will put them over the top. So just want to make sure that people are hearing that right.
Well,
but
I mean
I've
over
got
the
a
top
guy
as in, like, to keep them at, like, the 3 seed.
Just because JaVale McGee didn't get bought out, or what, Sean?
JaVale.
Well, tell me you didn't watch that game and go, man, he could certainly help the Kings.
Every time I see JaVale, I just think Jason Jones.
And by the way,
loves JaVale McGee.
Can I point something out? You don't have to look very far on that coaching staff to somebody who coached JaVale McGee, who could certainly love to have JaVale McGee and had him as a champion.
Yeah. Okay. So let's hit the buyout market then.
Okay, maybe
His
I'm
name is
slow,
Mike
but
Brown.
explain the name. Okay.
Yeah.
I thought to
Yeah,
lose,
Mike Brown.
but I guess Mike makes sense.
Yeah.
No, the guy that, and first of all, look, I'm not saying I wanted JaVale McGee. I'm just saying things that, like, I hear scouts talk about it. I hear people come in, and the guy who hasn't been playing very much, and he came in, he kicked the Kings' ass. He really did. He kicked their ass that game.
Yeah. No, I
And
agree.
you look at what JaVale McGee could do. It's like, no, that would be nice. You don't have somebody like that on your roster presently, and that's, I think, the larger point. But I do think
That
it's
is
away
the
from the
larger
center
point.
position.
Yeah.
I think also, you ask, is there a guy that I've had my eye on? It's a guy I've had my eye on for a while, even last year, and he's helped the Lakers phenomenally. He's helped the Spurs at times. He fit in nicely with the Spurs. Stanley Johnson is a guy that I think could come in as a two-way player and hopefully be cheap, because I don't think you need to commit money to next year for him. I don't think he should want that either, because I think he'll have a home. But and just keeping in mind of what things the Kings have in the works for potentially next year, in terms of Sasha Vezenkov, things like that, you don't need to commit a whole lot of money to people. I think Stanley Johnson could help this team here and now.
I think Stanley Johnson is a minimum contract with a team option for next year at I think it's like a 2-year 3 that you could have just claimed.
And he just cleared waivers.
Did he clear waivers?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he did. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's a guy that, if you really wanted, you probably should have just claimed. Because it was a super, super low budget contract.
But you could also just, him clearing waivers, you can just go and sign him for the rest of the season.
Yeah, but then you're competing with teams. As opposed to if you claim him, then he has no choice. Brenden,
I think in a perfect world situation, though, you don't want to owe him money for next year. I think that's based on things that you are anticipating with your team. You can certainly be in the conversation, but I don't think you want to be on the books having to owe him money for next year.
No,
so
that makes sense.
Just for clarification, I guess I should know this, but if you claim him, you're picking up that contract that also includes the next year.
Well, actually, I'm looking at Stanley Johnson's contract. He's $1.67 million for this year, and that's it. He doesn't have a contract for next year. So you could have just claimed Stanley Johnson and had him and not worried about the second year. Or even if he was, it's possible that that's what his contract looks like. I'm going to look at one more spot where I can actually see what his contract was.
But if you claim a player, you're claiming their current contract.
Yeah, you claim their current contract. So that's why, if Nerlens Noel gets waived, the Kings aren't picking up that $9 million contract. So Stanley was on a $2.35 million, but he only counts 1.6 something. January 2022, he signed a 2-year, $3.2 million deal. They could have easily, my point, Sean, is if you wanted Stanley Johnson, you had to waive a player to do it, and that might be why the Kings didn't, because they don't want to waive a player until they know they have a player. And so, and they're at 15. The roster spots are filled. So as of right now, but, again, you bring up Stanley, Brenden, what are you thinking as far as players?
I don't mind Stanley Johnson. I think he fits the prototype. I worry about him offensively, but I think there's some versatility there defensively at 6'6". I think he fits sort of the prototype you're talking about, but I don't mind Nerlens Noel. I'm admittedly a big Pat Bev guy, and I kind of think he can play the 1 and the 2. You don't think Pat Bev?
Have you watched Pat Bev the past 2 years? They don't need that guy on the team.
What is that guy? You don't think they need defense?
He's inept offensively. You already have Davion Mitchell, who's going through some struggles.
What is Davion better at than Pat Bev?
Defensively, he is better than than Patrick Beverley at this point in his career. Are you kidding me? Okay, Patrick Beverley isn't what he used to be, guys. He's a head case, so just add that on top of it.
You can't play both of them.
James knows me. I love Patrick Beverley. I love head cases. I love people who have a little bit of crazy in them. I think every team needs them. You don't need Patrick Beverley.
Don't think you can play both of them?
Who? At the same time?
Yeah.
Were you talking about Mitchell and him?
Yeah, not for long.
Why would you want to? Why
Not
would you
for
want
long.
to?
Because what are your other options right now? You played Keon Ellis last
Well,
night. I mean, it
but I
wasn't
don't think
long, but you played Kessler Edwards last night. Like Kessler Edwards
Yeah,
has
but
potential, but
that's more my point though. That's why I look to more of a bigger wing type player as opposed to a backcourt player. I think a lot of their deficiencies, like they can hide deficiencies on the in the backcourt. I think Fox is a capable defender. I think Mitchell is a stellar defender, and I think Monk gives you enough of defensive effort. I think a lot of their stuff is more wing and especially at the perimeter. And I think it's obviously KZ Okpala is not in the equation at the moment, but I think Stanley Johnson gives you more than what KZ Okpala can give you on the offensive end, and give you slightly less than what KZ Okpala would give you on the defensive end. I just think that's a role that could help out for sure.
Okay, so let's do speed round then. Russell Westbrook, yay or nay on the buyout market?
God no.
No.
I'm gonna throw up.
That's a negativo from James. John Wall.
No.
Same answer. No.
I'm slightly more intrigued by John Wall than I am by the others. By Westbrook, just because I think John is.
You got to know. You're third in the West. You got to know. You got to know if this person's going to help you. And you just labeled another guy who's not great defensively.
Wait, why do you
not
have to
in
know?
You don't kick the
if you bring
tires.
them
What's
on
that?
and they don't play, like, what's the big deal?
Because you already have guys that don't play that you're not affecting the chemistry. You're not disrupting anything. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Yeah, fair enough.
Let's go.
You don't need to pick up anybody that doesn't play. If you're picking somebody up, you're picking up somebody that's going to be.
You would hope
going to rotationally help you.
Can I ask real quick? Who's the guy that you cut?
Well, who are we asking?
Len?
Are we asking me, or are we asking like what the Kings would do?
I'll ask you
because I would cut Matthew Dellavedova.
Okay.
I would do Alex Len.
Okay.
That's a little pricier,
right?
But
it doesn't matter though.
It doesn't really matter at this point.
If he's not going to play, he's not going to play. Yeah, I think you could cut Alex. I think Dellavedova has been more of a leader than
hire him as a coach.
Than Alex. Oh, that's true. That's true.
He plays here and there. Alex Len doesn't play unless he's starting a random game.
Okay, so I mean, you could also there's a list there. You could keep going. You could cut Kessler Edwards. You could cut KZ Okpala.
What are the rules, James? You could do with your two ways.
You have to. Well, they can't play in the playoffs. So your two ways. Well, no. I mean, your two-way players can play up to 50 games, and those guys have been tracking games this whole time. If they're on the roster for a game, they get then it counts towards their 50. But when you get to the end of the year, you have to, if you want them to play in the playoffs, you have to waive a player and clear a roster spot and sign them to the main roster. So even if the Kings were to waive somebody now and then clear up a roster spot and then go chase one of these guys in the buyout market, they could come back around and say, okay, none of those guys worked out, or our season's kind of gone really well and we're not going to use that spot anyways. We might as well promote somebody, and then you could sign someone else to a two-way. You can use it two ways all the way up till pretty close to the end of the year. You remember they signed Luke King to a two-way really late in the year after the buyout market and everything. They converted Chimezie Metu from a two-way to a regular contract, and then added Luke King.
Yeah, and nobody ever goes from a roster player, or unless you're unsigned, and then you have to they're just a free agent and you sign them to a two-way, but you have to cut another two-way basically. So if you cut Keon Ellis, sorry, your virgin ears there, Brenden.
How
that would
dare you? Holy!
But just as an example, if you were to cut Keon Ellis, you'd have to sign somebody else as a two-way player.
You don't have to. I mean, yeah. I mean, you can leave a two-way spot open. But
but I'm saying if you're filling that, yeah.
Yeah, and you can also convert someone. You can go to them and see if you can convert them from a regular contract to a two-way. Once you cut a player, you cannot bring them back in any way, shape, or form because they've made too much money on the main roster. They're only allowed to make $50K. So that's where we got with Chima Moneke, where the Kings couldn't send him to Stockton. They couldn't do anything else with him. Okay, hang on. We got to keep going on this list. Nerlens Noel. Yes, no?
No.
Yes. How dare you?
Well,
you have seen him play, haven't you?
Not really. Is kind of the issue this year. This year? This year, no. Previously, yes, but he has not played much this year. But what does it hurt trying? Your backup center sucks right now.
We've heard rumors at the Kings, well, that Mike Brown specifically liked Nerlens Noel. Like that's out there. So whether
protection.
or not he and he hasn't been waived yet, but the likelihood of him being waived now just jumped because of the Weissman deal. So once they traded Weissman there, and they have, Isaiah Stewart, and they have
Jalen Duren.
Jalen Duren's a stud. Like they don't need Nerlens Noel, and the idea there, he's owed $9 million next year, but it's a team option. So if you waive him now, you pay out his whatever. Maybe you can save $1 million in the buyout. I don't know.
There's still Marvin Bagley. We don't know what position he plays yet.
I would, you know what? I don't love Nerlens Noel. I would take a flyer on him because he is a better defensive player than what you have, and he's got better length, and he's a better shot blocker than Chimezie Metu or, Rashawn Holmes or anyone else that they have at this point. He's more versatile a defender, I think, and he can actually protect the rim. And he's always been a good steal guy as well. Will Barton.
Yes. I'm coming from the standpoint of in place of Alex Len, who's not playing. So it's very easy for me to say yes to people.
Intriguing. You have my attention.
Yeah, he can score and he can play a little D. Like I would take Will Barton. I don't know if he would choose the Kings. And then the last on my list was Pat Bev, and we got a no, a yes, and I'm probably going to say no, but I'd also say like Pat Bev can be like a heart and soul guy. He's a guy who holds players accountable on the court. He is a guy who has made the playoffs many, many times. And that, like, I think is a guy that Minnesota missed a lot when he left the room.
They missed that version of him for sure.
They missed his personality
as
much
ago.
as they missed anything else. It was last year.
So I put out a name. What was your name that you would die on a hill for?
Like if I'm looking at this list, I would probably choose Will Barton, and I would also look at Nerlens Noel. I would see if I could get them both, because I think those players fit positions of need. That makes sense.
Brenden?
That I'm dying on a hill for? I don't think any of these players are dramatic.
No, none of them are
dramatically changing anything. I'm going to go with Pat Bev. I think defensive intensity, and I think just bringing a edge,
asshole culture
to a unit. I feel like people think he's an asshole if you're on the other side of it. When he's on, I feel like it's one of those guys that when he's on your team, that you go to bat for him. But he's never been on my team, admittedly. So
I will say this selfishly: if Pat Beverly comes to the Kings, even though I said I wouldn't sign him, I'm gonna be thoroughly entertained. So you will, for people who think that like Sean doesn't want Pat Beverly on the team, I will be absolutely entertained, and I will request him for every media availability.
Right.
Because I absolutely love the guy, but I wouldn't sign him. No.
I'm gonna go the other way. I would sign him. I'm just gonna like right now. I don't think Davion's giving you enough, unfortunately, and he's not bringing any of that edge, that personality. And I think one guy like that on the defensive end, being noisy, and he can actually create a bit of a culture, a buzz on that end to help out. So, okay, we got to wrap this thing up pretty quick. What do you got, Brenden?
Just to be clear, I'm not saying like the Kings have to get Pat Bev. I just was forced to pick a name in the buyout market. Yeah, I'm forced to pick Pat Bev, and Sean is forced to pick what was the name? It wasn't.
Stanley
I'm the
Johnson.
Nerlens guy.
How dare you?
No,
Stanley.
Yeah, well, whatever.
Yeah, I would take Stanley Johnson too. Like I don't know, there's enough names here, guys that might be able to help you defensively. Like
James
maybe
would like to sign 3 on the buyout market and waive 3 on this team. I think that's what we've learned about James.
I mean, they play 9 guys.
I see
every
3
night.
cuts. I see 3 cuts without even like I'm not even tired. Like sorry, cut you. You're gone. You're gone. Okay, let's go quick. Final thoughts. Sorry, Sean, we don't have time for long-winded Rihanna takes.
You know how
floating
I feel.
Rihanna was amazing. Go ahead.
Did she almost fall?
No, one of her dancers almost did. But what a recovery, man! If you can find it on Twitter, he does kind of he or she, I don't know, he was in that white getup, but kind of slipped, fell on his ass, got right back up, and I'm like, you're 150 feet above the field. It's not like he dangled over the side. He or she dangled over the side. He got back up. So,
Sylvester
a little
Stallone
scary moment. But
cliffhanger moment.
it was kind of like Luca falling on his ass when he was backpedaling. The other night. That was
Talking
amazing.
shit.
Yeah,
Yeah, that would be
yeah.
freaky. That high up in the air on that stage.
Tell me about it.
That was crazy.
Yeah. But no, she
Brenden,
was
final
fantastic.
thoughts?
I've grown to really enjoy the Kelsey Brothers podcast, which is probably fitting throughout the time of them both being in the Super Bowl, but check that out. It's very enjoyable.
Have they done their new one yet?
They just did. I think it came out earlier today, and I've seen clips where Jason is crying about seeing his mom after the fact and how special the week it was for her and everything. So they just came out with their post game. Their pregame Super Bowl one was great.
She was a rock star out there, man.
She was. The split jersey was great.
That and like she may have wanted to have a discussion with her sons about like not dropping F-bombs in the middle of major national television interviews. That would be nice, but like to each their own. Like good for them.
I love it.
I'm all excited like because Mahomes won. So yeah.
Do you have a shrine of Mahomes in your house yet?
No, but he's my
Do you want to
fantasy
show off your
quarterback.
Super Bowl ring
One
again?
of the boats says Mahomes on the side, or
It does not say
SS
rolling with
Mahomes.
Mahomes. SS rolling with Mahomes. Yeah. I don't. No, I do have a jersey, which my son bought me for Christmas. I'm not a jersey guy, and my wife wore it for Super Bowl Sunday. But yeah, me and my son, we like to have the jersey and then take pictures with the rings when we mock our fantasy football.
Your son likes to take a lot of
with
pictures.
the
They were pretty
multiple
good.
rings.
No, that's it. That's my older son. My older son is not in a lot of pictures. My younger son may have had the greatest picture in the history of pictures, which we're not going to discuss here because he's young and he makes
it
mistakes.
sound dirty.
And yeah. Okay, well, that's going to do it for this edition of the Kings Beat podcast. I have to go jump on the radio. It's one of those days where we're in double duty. But you guys are good? Yeah?
All good.
Yeah, man.
Sean, safe travels in
Thanks,
in
guys.
Utah. I think this is probably going to be the only podcast this week because we get a little break here. But we'll hit this thing hard next week when Sean's back from Utah. We'll talk about Sean's dry weekend and all that
Dry?
stuff.
What do you mean?
Kidding. Just because you're going to Utah, just messing with you and the great state of Utah.
Very
yeah,
saturated.
So, there we go. He'll bring his own. All right, so that's going to do it for this edition of the Kings Beat podcast. Make sure to hit the thumbs
you were
up button.
talking about alcohol.
You're a
alcohol.
dumbass, Sean.
Yeah, you're a dumbass. Make sure to subscribe. Make sure to jump on board with the Kings Beat with a premium subscription so you can get access to all content. So for a not very
myself
dry
laugh.
country's Fox 40 Sean Cunningham
Countries? What are we talking about?
and Brenden Nunes from the Kings Pulse podcast. I'm James Ham, Kings Insider for ESPN 1320 and the Kings Beat. We'll see you next week.
Oh, that's